Chocolate cake is perhaps one of the most popular cakes worldwide. There's nothing like a delicious, soft, full of chocolatey goodness cake. Oh yes, the perfect chocolate cake is an absolute delight. And this video is for you if you've always wanted to make that perfect chocolate cake that just tastes absolutely right. I'll tell you a little story. The first time I made a chocolate cake, it was an absolute disaster. This is what I did. I made the standard cake batter and then I added cocoa powder because that's what you do. For most other cakes, you make your base batter and then you add the flavoring. So if I'm making a lemon cake, I would add lemon juice and lemon zest. If I was making a strawberry cake, I would add strawberry flavoring. You get the picture. That's what you do for most cakes, but you can't afford to do that with chocolate cake. And we'll get on to why that's the case. So back to this cake. It was soft, but it was super dry. So you can't do that to get the perfect chocolate cake. So in this video, we're going to talk about the ingredients, the things and the steps that you have to do to get that cake that tastes absolutely yummy. And then I'm going to show you how to make a chocolate cake. So by the end of this video, you are going to be a guru at making chocolate cake. You're going to have a tried and tested chocolate cake recipes that work. And all you've got to do is follow the step. Voila, you've made yourself a beautiful, delicious chocolate cake. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Let's look at some of the key ingredients that we're going to be using to make our chocolate cake and learning a little bit, just not too much, just a little bit, enough that you get the idea of what you are doing. Because one thing I've noticed with cake making is that actually, if you don't fully understand what you are doing, then when things go wrong, sometimes you haven't got a clue, like what have I done wrong? And then you don't know how to fix it. So knowing a little bit about your cake ingredients goes a long way. If that is you and you think, actually, I don't know what the different cake ingredients are, why I'm using it, you should check out my Back to Baking series where I dive deep into most of the common cake ingredients so you can get up to speed with that. And honestly, that is a video to watch, and it's actually one of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel. Speaking of my YouTube channel, which is where you are at, don't forget to subscribe for lots more cake tutorials and videos aimed at making you from a beginner baker into a super confident pro baker. Okay, back to our chocolate cake. Obviously, the start of the cake is cocoa powder. Cocoa powder, which I've measured in here. Don't worry, if you look down in the description section, I have a full list of the ingredients that we're going to use to make our chocolate cake and the quantities required, so check it out on there. So cocoa powder. Now, cocoa powder is made from the cocoa bean. It has some features that require you to treat them in a certain way to get the best out of it. First of all, I will let you know that cocoa powder is an acidic ingredient. So it does interact with some of the other ingredients in our cake that are acid and base. So we have the buttermilk, the baking powder, the bicarbonate of soda, all of that interact together to give your cake a rise. So these agents are what we call leavening agents. By that I mean the baking powder and the bicarbonate of soda. They help your cake to rise. And the buttermilk and the cocoa powder also interact with that process. So you need to strike the right balance with your ingredients, which is why it's essential that you use the stated quantities in your recipe. Cocoa powder is also quite drying. Now that is why that first chocolate cake I made that I said turned out really dry, that's what happened. Cocoa powder sucks out moisture. It's a very drying ingredient. So if you don't have a lot of moisture in your cake, you're not going to get a perfectly tasting cake. So you'll notice that part of the ingredients, I've not got it here now because it's one thing that you need to make fresh, is the addition of hot coffee. It's quite a lot of water, and at the end when you make the batter, you'll see that the chocolate batter is actually quite runny, and that is deliberate. That's because you need to add a lot of moisture into the cake so that you strike the balance and you don't get a dry cake. Now I said coffee, hot coffee. Yes, steaming, freshly prepared hot coffee. Now, if you've never come across this in a recipe, you might be scratching your head thinking, well, we're making chocolate cake. Why are we adding coffee? Now, coffee enhances the flavor of cocoa. So adding it to your chocolate cake, oh my goodness, it's an absolute game changer. It really brings out that depth of cocoa in your cake, giving it that chocolate goodness. And I'll tell you this, you don't taste the coffee. Like literally, you do not taste the coffee. So you get the benefit of the moisture from a lot of the water that is from the coffee, as well as enhancing your cocoa flavor. So it's a win-win in my book. Now, some people still argue and say, well, I don't really want to put coffee in my cake, or they have concerns if they're making a cake for young children who they don't want to have any coffee at all, or they just do not like the idea of coffee. You can skip out the coffee, but don't skip out the water because you need that for the moisture. Another ingredient that is important in this recipe is the addition of buttermilk. Buttermilk gives flavor. It also helps to balance that acid-base interaction between your baking powder, bicarbonate of soda, and also the cocoa powder. And it also gives moisture. It also helps to tenderize your cake, giving it a nice crumb structure. So buttermilk is an absolute essential. Another reason why this amazing chocolate cake recipe is easy to make is that you do not need a hand mixer or a stand mixer. You can do it all by hand. You do need 2 bowls. One bowl is going to contain your dry ingredients, and then you have 1 bowl for wet ingredients. Make sure that you have a bowl that is big enough to take all the contents, because eventually you're going to mix the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients. So that's very important. Those are the key things that you need to consider when making the perfect chocolate cake. So I think we've done enough talking, enough sciencey bits. Let's get to the fun part. Let's start baking. The first thing we're going to do is combine all the dry ingredients into a bowl. It should be the larger of the 2 bowls, because eventually everything is going to end up in this big bowl. You need a sieve. I don't often sieve my flour, but with chocolate cake, yes, you should sieve your flour, and almost certainly you should sieve cocoa powder. Cocoa powder tends to clump together, so you need to sieve it to loosen all that clump so that you have nicely fine dispersed ingredients. So I've pre-measured all the flour and all the main ingredients. The cocoa powder as well. This is why you sieve your cocoa powder. So look at that. If you don't sieve it, all those clumps are going to end up in your cake. And then when you or your loved ones or customers or whoever eats the cake bites into a lump of cocoa powder, it's like, yeah, not a very nice taste. Give that a whisk to start to combine. Your sugar is also forms part of your dry ingredients in this cake recipe. Now this recipe, it may seem like it calls for quite a lot of sugar. The reason for that is because cocoa powder is actually quite bitter. So you do need to add enough sugar to strike that balance. Again, you hear me say balance quite a few times. The key to making a perfect cake is to get the right balance of all your cake ingredients. So you see why I say understanding your cake ingredients does make a difference, because then you know how to get the best from them. So don't be tempted to reduce the amount of sugar, otherwise you might end up with a bitter tasting cake. So we add the salt. And baking powder. Sorry, bicarbonate of soda and baking powder. So 1.5 teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoon of both the baking powder and the bicarbonate of soda. And no, they are not the same thing. They are two very different ingredients. When you watch my baking ingredient series, you will never be confused about the difference. So whisk that nicely together. You want everything to be nicely combined together. So set that aside, and now we're going to prep all the wet ingredients. So we're going to be measuring the wet ingredients. The buttermilk. So your buttermilk should be at room temperature. This is important to get everything mixing properly together. So start to whisk that together. Now, they're not going to want to come together because oil and liquids don't tend to mix. We'll give it a stir. There is one ingredient that actually allows these two to combine well together, and that is the eggs. So eggs is it's a multitasking ingredient. Again, if you watch my baking ingredients series, you'll get to know eggs even better. But one of the important characteristics that eggs have is that it acts as an emulsifier. So it allows oil, fat and water to mix properly. So whisk that together. In this recipe we're using 2 eggs. So when you whisk it with the egg, you can see it's coming together. You know, I almost forgot one ingredient, which is vanilla extract. So we're going to add that. And I've already had my hot water and my coffee from my coffee machine brewed. And I can taste that coffee goodness. So that's my brewed coffee, and I'm just going to add boiling hot water to get the desired quantity, and then we're going to add that together. Coffee smell, and I don't even drink coffee. Okay, so we're going to mix the wet and dry ingredients. Actually, at this point, switch from your whisk to a spatula. Make like a well in the middle of the dry ingredients, and then you just pour the wet into there and then mix it until it's combined. Just again, as always, when you are mixing flour with wet ingredients, because it starts to activate the gluten molecules in the flour, which on the one hand help to form bonds that give your cake its structure. You don't want to overwork the flour. You don't want to overmix the flour, because what that does is you then form too many gluten molecules, which actually has the opposite effect of making your cake tough. So here's our cake tin that's prepared. I've lined it to have a high side because I'm using springform tins which have a loose bottom, and because, as you can see, our batter is quite loose and runny, you don't want it seeping through the seams. If you are using a one-piece baking tin, then you don't have to line the sides. If you don't know how to line your cakes, then my tutorial where I show you my method of lining my cake would be really helpful, because I use my tried and tested method. Well, not mine, but a tried and tested method that works all the time. So you should check it out. And all that's left to do is pop it in the oven to bake. And then we're going to come back and see our final result. So our cake is ready. Let's go and get it out of the oven. Safety first. Stuff that comes out of the oven is very hot. I don't know why I feel the need to say that, but you'd be surprised. So wear thick oven gloves, protect yourself at all times. Yeah, this looks good, y'all. This looks good. I'm gonna have a closer look. So let it cool for about 5 minutes in the cake pan before taking it out.